Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian Farmers, Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Thursday, May 25th. Wow. Well, we've got some interesting things going on. We've got a number of things to kind of go over in this video, including what these semis and what technology are doing. This very, very narrow breadth that we're seeing in the market right now. Big winners in some of the areas that are participating, but a lot of things that are not doing well. So we'll get into all of that. We'll also talk a little bit about interest rates too, which have been moving pretty decently. Before I do that, risk disclaimer in front of you: everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. So first, before we kind of get into the nitty gritty, and of course, talk a little bit about AI and NVIDIA, which were the big movers for the day. It's just interesting when we look at the performance. There, you could see, I try to update this in my spreadsheet every day. It's just a quick snapshot of what things are doing, like year to date, over the last 5 days, and month to date. And a lot of these things have kind of turned. There's more red on the page than there is green. And specifically, a couple things that I would note here is that when you look at the growth versus value, and this is mainly in this VUG VTV ETF, it's mainly larger cap, but over the last 5 days, value is down 4.2% and growth is up, but not as much as the declining there, up 3.5%. Very interesting. The ARK Innovation ETF, which I try to keep on here, is just kind of a proxy. I'm sorry, and that's month to date. Sorry if I didn't say that regarding the value versus growth. Growth is actually, you could see, is down 30 basis points over the last 5 days. ARK Innovation and the IBD 50, they're both down over the last 5 days. I saw a lot of articles, a lot of posts about the ARK Innovation ETF, how it's one of those things. If you're ever looking at an ETF, I'm just going to throw this tidbit in here, right? Always, people sometimes, number one, people get thrown off by the volume that they see in an ETF. Remember, with an ETF, it tracks an underlying basket. So when a market maker is making a market, as I used to do back in my institutional days at Merrill Lynch, right? They're sourcing the liquidity in the underlying basket. So don't ever, in my opinion, right, unless it's something that doesn't track stocks, right? Don't always take a look at the volume in the ETF and say, oh geez, it doesn't trade anything, it's not liquid. It's not the case. It's based on the underlying basket. So anyway, sorry, I didn't want to go off on a tangent about that, but the other thing too, that's number one, don't get thrown off by the volume in an ETF, because it's the basket a lot of times that drives the liquidity that it tracks. And number two, don't just go by the label of an ETF, right? You have to look at what names, just because, and my example all the time is the home builders, right? So for example, XHB is called the home building ETF, or the home builders ETF, but there's very little home builders in it, or I think they call it the home building ETF. And ITB is home construction, and that's the one that's got all the home builders in it. So you always have to look to see what's in it. And the point that I'm making here really quick is that the innovation ETF is not very innovative. And I know people have made arguments about this, but it doesn't have any of the AI stocks, which are obviously the hottest things and very innovative, but they use their own judgment, and the performance speaks for that. So I'll move on from that, because that's not what I really want to talk about in this video. But and here's what's interesting. The Qs are up 5.3%. They're now up 27% year to date. And there's not much else that's really performing. The small caps, mid caps are both now down on the year, according to my spreadsheet. Sometimes this is off a little bit, depending if you track dividends too. But SPY is up 8.4%. That's fine, year to date. It's just it hasn't gone nuts like this Q. So what do you do with this? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the breadth for the day. This is just SPX, so this is not the Qs, right? But it's kind of interesting, the 52-week highs, right? It's mainly the semis, of course, and it's some software plays in there too. But look, in terms of the semiconductors, Broadcom, Lam Research, Clack is in there. SNPS, which made a huge move today as well. Cadence is in there. AMD is in there. And then you've got your software names, Oracle, ServiceNow. So again, like that's it for 52-week highs. And I missed a couple in there too. Meta's in there and Microsoft's in there too. But the 52-week lows, it's 3 times greater. There's 33 new 52-week lows, which is 3 times as many as the new highs. And then it gets even crazier. I'm just gonna enhance this a little bit so that you could see it, but it gets even crazier when you look at the 4-week, right? This is percentage, but so there's 23 new highs, and again, it's mainly those groups. A couple other names in there. Interesting. Raymond James is in there. Didn't see that. Again, it's always important to kind of go through the new highs and new lows, because there will be names that you weren't expecting when you go through this exercise. And also RL's in there too. So again, interesting. But look at all so 23 new highs and 189 new lows, and that's 4-week new lows. I mean, that is a crazy stat. So yes, and that, this is what people have been talking about, is that this breadth is super weak. So, what do you do with this market, right? Where you've got some really dramatic moves to the upside, and if you don't participate in those, you're kind of left out of this market. But meanwhile, there's not much else going on. No, of course, if you are a tech or growth investor, like, you're loving this, right? But overall, a lot of people try to have diversified portfolios, and that's not a right now that's not working very well. Not to say that it's a bad idea or anything like that. It's just in this environment, it's not working well. So, in terms of how I trade and how we trade in the Tribeca Trade Group, my bread and butter is swing trading, but I'll tend to kind of day trade a little bit more when we've got such limited participation like this. And those are the kind of things, I was on Benzinga this morning, kind of talking about just that. They were asking me, like, what do you do with this? Do you chase some of these moves? And I think you do it with the right position size. I think that you can kind of be in some of these names that are making some of these moves, but do it with what conviction you have. You can't borrow conviction. You can't borrow conviction from somebody else, right? It has to be something that you're comfortable with. And holding a little bit less positions, I think, definitely helps in this market. Being able to kind of take advantage of what the market is giving you, which, some days, like I had an Oracle position on from yesterday. Oracle was up over 5%. So yeah, I'm going to take that and I'm going to put a good portion of that in my pocket, right? And then watch to see what happens on the next day, right? And speaking of which, I'll just kind of make this quick, but tomorrow we do have an important data point. Friday before a long weekend, we get the PCE deflator, right, which is another gauge of inflation to monitor. They're looking for 0.3%. You can see we've got a lot of other data too. So there's could be something else in here. I view the PCE deflator as the most important thing, but you also have personal income, spending. You've got durable goods in there. You've got University of Michigan sentiment number, right, as well. So yes, here's where we are. It's the 25th, Friday, Monday's off, and then basically we've got 3 more trading days of this month, right? And here's what it looks like in terms of the Fed's. Yesterday we had the Fed minutes, which I didn't even really get a chance to talk about because of all the moves that were happening after hours. But yes, this is the highest level in terms of what Fed fund futures are implying for a rate hike. This is the highest it's been since since the last Fed meeting. So June, right? They're expecting at this point, like, it's about a 50% shot that they increase interest rates again by 25 basis points. Now, we'll get more information, such as tomorrow's PCE deflator, and we'll also get another round of the CPI and PPI reports before the meeting. So this is to be determined, but just kind of interesting, right? And then again, before we get into any of the single stocks, what's happening in bonds is very interesting, right? It's another big move in interest rates, and we have taken this out. If you're a member of Tribeca Trade Group, you know that I've been talking about this like every day for the last 2 weeks. Talked about that this looked like a head and shoulders pattern in the 30-year bond futures, left shoulder, head shoulder, some kind of right shoulder, breaking of the neckline, and we have moved down to the virgin point of control. So, target achieved to the downside. We'll see if we can provide some stabilization, but we don't have any confirmation of that too. Also, a good number of volume coming in the last couple of days. Now, of course, TLT is going to look a little bit different because it's a different maturity, but that has also been moving down. Now, again, remember, if you're talk about this quite a bit, but if you're looking at HYG, you've got to do a comparison, right? Because a lot of this move to the downside is just that, is what, and the comparison is with IEF. Right. So interest rates are on the move, not so much credit. Okay. Let me say that again. Right. There is a component of interest rates, right, in any of those bond ETFs. So mainly the move that you're seeing in HYG, which is the high yield bond ETF, is because of the overall level of interest rates are moving. Right. And again, you kind of have to benchmark that to treasuries to figure that out. All right. So that's a lot to say already. And I haven't even talked about, some of the big movers, but yeah, so semis just up huge today, right? And also NVIDIA is in the tech ETF too. So up 24%. I did buy a little bit of this today. I mean, I've been, NVIDIA has been a big trade for me this year, but I didn't hold any of it, in my trading account. So, I actually waited for this to kind of a little bit of profit taking for the day, right? You could see it actually did not close well today, but I took targets. I waited for, the profit taking like in the beginning of the day, and I kind of went into it here, and you could see. Oh, by the way, this is my CF commentary channel, right? If you're a member of Tribeca Trade Group, I do provide updates during the day. These nice audio files that I could kind of just quickly give you. So if you're a part-time trader and you're looking for updates, hey, what's going on in this market? I do provide them several times during the day so that you can quickly get updated, even if you're, someone who's got meetings all day long, which I know a lot of people are dealing with. So we do that. So here's what I did in terms of NVIDIA today. I just bought a little bit, and then I took some off, and then my comment was, I took some off at 393. So I took 3 targets, and I said, hey, I'll add back a little bit, but having a small piece in this is fine, right? And again, especially when you could take off the majority of the position, and then you can kind of, if it happens to come in a little bit further, then I can kind of add, because I think that I think that this is going to stay a market leader for some time. Now, eventually, you might see some profit taking, and it's kind of difficult to deal with that candle. And, maybe it does back and fill somewhere in here, but I believe that dips will get bought. And that was something else that I talked about on the Benzinga show this morning, is that with all these macro things going on right now, I believe that you'll get chances, in some of these names. After hours, just to talk about a couple other things that went on or that are going on. Look at Marvell, mentioned their revenue is going to double in the AI space. Also, Workday had a nice earnings move as well. So, I'm long some Salesforce. I'm hoping that will kind of catch a little bit. Salesforce is another name that I've been playing recently. Took out this last VPOC up here. That was a great place to take profits, which is what we did in the room. And now that it's kind of dipped a little bit, I like to kind of stick with names that are doing that. CrowdStrike also had a decent day. I was able to take a profit target a little bit higher. I actually added into some weakness this morning, right, when it kind of came into here, and that worked well. But again, I'm looking for a run for CrowdStrike just into the earnings, which is so we have 3 more days. It reports on the 31st, right? And that's it. A couple other things I did buy. This was a nice trade for me last night. I had bought some SMH right when NVIDIA was reporting, and I was able to take that off for 137. My entry price was 131. And again, I just kind of took my profits in the beginning of the day. I mentioned Oracle, which was a trade that I had sent out, yesterday, right when I got into it on Twitter. Really nice dip into the 20-day moving average. Again, this was a name that I was long in here. I took it off and re-adding on a dip, and really surprised at this thing. Up, I said 5%, I think earlier, but up 6%. Another name that saw option activity was Arista Networks, right? It kind of got forgotten about a bit, after earnings, but, one hell of a pop today. This SMCI, right, is another name that people are not associating with with this artificial intelligence theme. But look at this thing. It went it went up to 213 this morning. This stock was at, I mean, this is going to be one of the biggest gainers of the year. Just a couple months ago, this was trading at 80 bucks. I mean, it's up to over $200. So just incredible. And the run that it's had since it reported earnings, right? I talk about this all the time about sometimes names, this is when it reported earnings. And if you felt like you missed it at 134, the stock's up to 213. Just unreal. So don't always get discouraged by a strong earnings report. And you're like, oh, I don't have any of it. Well, that's okay, because the stock was at 120, 130, and it's went up another over $70 since even the highs of when that occurred. Just unbelievable. A few other names that I thought were interesting. I don't know what's going on here, but Zoom saw a bunch of call buying in the last hour of the day. This is not a name that I like, but sometimes that's what you could use option activity or options for, is to take speculative trade on this one. Maybe it did have a nice bullish engulfing candle on the body of the candle, but who knows? Again, I like to mention the option activity because so many people are interested in that sort of thing, and sometimes I use that in my analysis, but it really has to fit my overall trading system. All right. Biotech, right? So again, talking about something that's dipping a little bit. Biotech was down 2.6%. Notice that it's got the 200, it's coming back into the 200-day moving average. So this is an area of interest for me. And I started a position because we do have these things down here called Virgin Point of Controls. And I think that this could get taken out. So I try to scale into positions when we don't have any confirmation that it's done going down, right? So notice that the price action is below all these moving averages. All right, but that's it for today's video. I think, like, overall, I mean, this is this is why I do this type of thing, because it is such an interesting market, to kind of talk about and to hear people on Twitter, go through, and they're like, oh, geez, it's just AI, and I get it. There's very slim breadth out there. One of the things that you can watch, which kind of helps, and I just posted this, even though it hasn't been updated for the day, but this is the McClellan Summation Index, right? We want to see this flip higher, right? That means breadth is expanding. We're not there yet. Now, of course, it has done that for the NASI, the Nasdaq McClellan Summation Index, but it has not done that. So that's something, as if you're, kind of doing a little bit of what I'm doing, which is holding a little bit less positions, waiting for this to kind of cross back over, and then we've got confirmation that breadth is expanding. Right. So we're not there yet, but, be patient, let these things, take place. And in the meantime, use, the strength that you're seeing in the market. Because one of the things that I'll kind of close here in this video with is, these trends last and things can stay, elevated and irrational, right, for longer than you think, right? And you could really make some good money when markets are acting pretty irrational and where there's some things that end up going a little bit too far to the upside, right? If you're a trader, you're capitalizing on that environment, right? Our job is not to argue with the market, right? Our job is to take what the market is giving us, understand when the overall market dynamics are not the best overall, right? And kind of use that into into our trading plan and figure out, like, how we're going to use the information that we're given, right? And then make adjustments. But our job is not to argue with what's going on, right? And not to say stubborn, right? We want to be nimble and we want to be flexible in this market. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching the video. Look forward to hope to see you guys in the trading room every day. We start at 9-10 in the morning with our pre-market segment, and we go over all the morning's movers, as well as trades that I have my eye on, as well as management for trades that I already have on. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.